There were a few themes that came up that I wasn't planning on focusing, but because they came up and they were so interesting, I went ahead and grabbed some excerpts based on one was the general issue of funding, technology and laptop one-to-one programs. Also, the idea of assessment came up, and also some ideas just around some thoughts about what the future of technology in the classroom is. We'll start with a short clip from Matt Howe from the local school, Oakland Junior High.
The hardest thing to compare or look at here and consider is there's not a real good measure out there for what daily exposure to 21st century skills does for a student. I mean, I would put just about any one of our kids here at Oakland Junior High up against any student at Stillwater Junior High. Similar grades, GPA, similar levels of everything, but put that kid in a real world type of situation or a mock interview, and our kids will blow those kids out of the water.
So you're a believer in the one-to-one.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just that daily interaction and that daily. I mean, you talk about web ethics and just knowing. I mean, it's that daily use that allows them to be able to go through and validate. They know how to validate sources on the web.
So just a short clip. Matt works at a one-to-one program, and he was comparing their kids to a neighboring school of the district, Stillwater Junior High, which has a CART model, and it's more of a 3-to-1. And he felt the one-to-one program was um, highly superior, and he was feeling some frustration around the fact that they're going to be losing their funding and they're going to have to go to a new model. He had more interesting things to say, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to another clip from Matt Mervis that was also very interesting.
Cyclical nature of these projects, where there's influx of state or federal cash, tends to make these things quite perilous.
Yeah.
And the only large enterprise-wide one-to-one I can think of that is, really had very thoughtful refresh cycles, which were built into local state operational, capital budgets, is Maine.
Mm.
And, I think the projects in Michigan and New Mexico, and even to some degree the projects in Texas, all have been kind of victim of not getting a refresh.
Right.
So, and the project that we're doing in Boston, which is the most effective one I've ever been involved in, is also, it will run the risk potentially of losing its traction. And to some degree, we're all culpable for that. In the Berkshires, we were charged to raise test scores and build 21st century skills and do all sorts of stuff. But when the day was done, test scores were sort of our metric.
Yeah.
And while we did raise test scores significantly in ELA, in both Pittsfield and North Adams, the inability to kind of marshal our state legislature and our delegation to help support and refresh the program, or municipal leaders, it wasn't there.
Do you kind of see that as a little bit of a failure in the assessment tools as much of anything else? I mean, do you feel like you're, when they're looking...
That's an interesting question. Maybe to some degree, although we had, Damien, we poured about $250,000 into Damien's shop to do research, and he did a nice job leveraging existing assessments. We built some of our own customized assessments, including a writing assessment. I think the data was there. I'll tell you that. I mean, the truth is, and the Berkshires is a million miles away from the sort of center of political power in Massachusetts.
Right.
And we had a state representative named Peter Larkin, who was the champion for the project, and Peter left the Massachusetts State House, and once your champion's gone, even if your numbers are good and we had good assessment data, we we didn't have it. And ironically, in the project in Dorchester in Boston, that was championed by a woman named Marie St. Fleur, who is a local representative from Suffolk County in eastern Massachusetts.
I saw her on there. Was she a state representative?
She's a state representative, and
Okay.
she actually held the same seat that Peter did. They shared a passion for this. They sort of she followed in Peter's footsteps. So she managed to have the political capital to get the project funded, but she's now not running for re-election. And I was just talking to Damien about this a couple days ago. It does expose us a little bit in terms of having the political will to support the project moving forward.
Right. Do you have any thoughts about how to change this kind of cyclical funding model? I mean, is the solution to go to something where the students have to bring in their own machines and then you focus a smaller amount of funding on a cloud app system?
That's an interesting question. I mean, there's definitely, Moore's Law, part of the argument tells us that this is just going to become easier to take care of as hardware costs continue to go down.
Mm-hmm.
The netbook thing's sort of interesting because it caused a real refresh in enthusiasm for one-to-one, but there's been some pushback too about the quality of the kids' experience with those tools. I do think in time, the fact that we're now down to the $200 price point, $300 price point, it's not impossible to think of this as a sustained cost that doesn't require external state or federal cash. Also, what we're seeing all across the country is the reallocation of textbook dollars and other curriculum material dollars that can be targeted towards ed tech. And so, even stuff like the iPad and the convergence of, kind of curricular resources, textbook resources, and an internet-based device may just kind of bake it into the formula. So that's one, scenario. Maine, again, is interesting to look at because unlike every other one-to-one that had a profile, and certainly the ones that Damien has in that consolidated study, I don't think there's any research from Maine in that journal publication. Maine built their one-to-one into the ongoing operational budget of the state, and so I think that is really
made a difference, huh?
Yeah, and I think it really does make a difference. You look at Texas, for instance. Texas has funded almost 7, 8, 9 years of pretty cool one-to-one stuff, but it's all been funded on E2T2, which is enhancing educational through technology. Okay. And Obama has zeroed out that budget in 2011. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to those guys from that. So, I think some of it's about just moving to operational budget. Some of it's about Moore's Law. Yeah. But the idea that these projects are based on these kind of infusion, 1 or 2 time infusions of external cash has been problematic.
Yeah.